When my golden child brother announced he and his wife were expecting their fifth baby, my parents threw their hands up in pure joy. My dad beamed and told him what a great job he was doing. Then my mother turned her sharp gaze to me and announced that I would be handling their other four kids. I said absolutely not. My sister-in-law snapped that I had no family of my own anyway, so I should consider this my training. I calmly put down my wine glass, picked up my purse, and walked out without another word. The next morning, the police called my office with news that would shatter my family's perfect facade forever. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to set a hard boundary with toxic relatives who felt entitled to your life. My name is Maya. I am 32 years old and a senior wealth manager for some of the most affluent clients in Atlanta. But in my family, my master's degree and seven-figure portfolio mean absolutely nothing because I am not married and I do not have children. Growing up in a strict household where appearances and church community standing meant everything, I was always the outlier. My parents, Desmond and Beatrice, worshipped at the altar of traditional family milestones. My brother Marcus, who is 3 years older than me, understood this game perfectly. He went to medical school, married a white woman named Chloe, and started churning out kids before he even finished his residency. He is the golden boy. I am the spinster aunt who chose spreadsheets over baby bottles. Our family gatherings are legendary in our community. My parents love hosting lavish Sunday dinners at their sprawling brick estate to show off Marcus and his expanding family. Last Sunday was supposed to be just another one of these performative dinners. I arrived on time dressed in a tailored navy suit, fresh from a weekend client meeting, bringing a bottle of expensive wine as a peace offering. I knew the drill. Smile, nod, and avoid making eye contact when my mother starts talking about my biological clock. The moment I walked through the door, the chaos of my brother's life was on full display. 4 children under the age of 8 were running through the foyer, screaming and throwing toys, while Chloe sat on the pristine white sofa, scrolling through her phone. Marcus was in the kitchen with my dad, loudly bragging about his new car. My mother immediately intercepted me, snatching the wine from my hands and giving my suit a disapproving once-over, loudly whispering that I looked far too masculine to ever attract a provider. We gathered in the formal dining room, the crystal chandelier casting a warm glow over the roasted turkey and collard greens. Once everyone was seated, Marcus stood up and tapped his fork against his wine glass. He wrapped his arm around Chloe, who was wearing a flowing floral dress and a smug expression. Marcus cleared his throat and announced that they were thrilled to share some incredible news. Baby number 5 was officially on the way. My parents erupted into applause. My father stood up and pulled Marcus into a massive bear hug, clapping him on the back. My mother rushed over to embrace Chloe, tears of joy streaming down her face. It was a picturesque scene of familial bliss. I smiled politely and offered my congratulations. Having 5 kids by the age of 35 was certainly a choice, especially considering Marcus was notoriously terrible with his finances, but it was not my place to judge. I took a sip of my water and prepared to slip out early. That is when the atmosphere shifted. My mother returned to her seat at the head of the table, wiped her eyes with a linen napkin, and turned her attention directly to me. "Maya," she said, her voice dropping into that authoritative tone she used when giving orders. "With the new baby coming, Marcus and Chloe are going to be overwhelmed. They need a baby moon to relax before the chaos starts. They are taking a 2-week trip to Cabo next month." I nodded slowly, unsure why she was telling me this. "That sounds nice," I said cautiously. "Have a great trip." Chloe leaned forward, resting her elbows on the mahogany table. "Well, we cannot exactly take the other 4 kids with us to a luxury resort," she said with a dismissive laugh. "So we are dropping them off at your place next Friday. You will take them for the 2 weeks while we are gone." I froze my glass halfway to my mouth. I stared at Chloe, waiting for the punchline, but she was completely serious. I looked at my brother, who was busily cutting his turkey, refusing to meet my eyes. "I cannot do that," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I work 60 hours a week managing high net worth portfolios. I do not have the time, the space, or the energy to watch 4 toddlers for 2 weeks. My mother slammed her hand flat on the table, making the silverware rattle. Maya, do not be selfish. Your brother works incredibly hard as a doctor. He saves lives. He deserves a break, and Chloe needs to rest for the baby. You are single. You have no husband to attend to, and no children of your own. What else could possibly be taking up all your time? My career, I replied, fighting the urge to raise my voice. The career that pays my mortgage. I am not a free babysitting service. They have the money for Cabo, so they have the money to hire a temporary nanny. Chloe let out a sharp, condescending laugh that made my blood boil. It is so typical of you to make everything about money, Maya. This is about family. We are giving you an opportunity to actually bond with your nieces and nephews. Since you do not have a family of your own, you should consider this your training for when you finally manage to keep a man. It will be good for you to learn how to be maternal instead of acting like a corporate robot. The sheer audacity of her words hung in the heavy air of the dining room. My father chimed in, pointing his fork at me from across the table. Your sister-in-law is right. You have always been too focused on yourself and your bank accounts, Maya. It is time you stepped up and acted like a proper aunt. We raised you to support this family, not to turn your back on your brother when he needs you. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. I saw the entitlement radiating from Marcus, the smug superiority shining in Chloe's eyes, and the bitter disappointment my parents never bothered to hide when they looked at me. They really believed that because my life did not look like theirs, my time and my peace were completely worthless. They believed they could just command me to halt my life to serve my brother. I did not scream. I did not throw a fit or engage in a shouting match. In my line of work, you learn that the person who loses their temper loses the negotiation. I calmly placed my linen napkin on the table and stood up. I smoothed the wrinkles from my suit skirt, looking down at the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I am not taking your kids, Marcus, I said, looking directly at my brother and forcing him to finally meet my gaze. I am not your nanny, and I am not your backup plan. Have a nice trip to Cabo. If you drop those kids at my door, I will treat them like abandoned property and involve the authorities. My mother gasped loudly, clutching her chest as if I had physically struck her. How dare you speak to your brother that way? You are a bitter, lonely woman, Maya. You are just jealous because Chloe has the life you will never be able to build for yourself. I picked up my purse and slipped its strap over my shoulder. I am not jealous, Mom. I am just exhausted by all of you. Good night. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I could hear Chloe scoffing behind me, loudly telling my parents to ignore my tantrum, and my father apologizing to her for my lack of grace. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove back to my peaceful penthouse in the city. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I had set a firm boundary and they would be forced to figure out their own childcare crisis. I severely underestimated the depths of their entitlement and the absolute insanity they were willing to commit to put me in my place. The week went by in silence. I assumed my threat had worked. It was Friday morning, exactly 5 days after that disastrous Sunday dinner. At 6 in the morning, my penthouse was completely silent, save for the hum of my espresso machine. I was standing at my kitchen island reviewing global market trends on my tablet, completely at peace. Then my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed a local number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a strange instinct made me swipe to answer. The voice on the other end was stern and professional. "Are you Maya?" the man asked. I confirmed that I was. He introduced himself as Officer Daniels with the Atlanta Police Department. I froze. My mind immediately jumped to a car accident or a medical emergency involving my parents. Instead, his next words completely knocked the wind out of me. "Ma'am," he said, "we have 4 young children down here in the main lobby of the Sterling building. They say you are their aunt. They were left with the front desk security guard 10 minutes ago by a black man and a white woman who immediately got back into a running SUV and drove off. The oldest child has a note pinned to his jacket with your name and suite number on it." For a full 5 seconds, I could not breathe. I gripped the edge of my marble countertop so hard my knuckles turned white. They actually did it. My 35-year-old doctor brother and his entitled wife actually dumped their 4 young children in the lobby of a corporate high-rise in the middle of downtown Atlanta. "Are you still there?" Officer Daniels asked, his tone growing impatient. "Yes," I breathed out, my voice deadly quiet. "I will be right there." I did not even change out of my silk robe. I threw on a trench coat, grabbed my keys, and sprinted to the private elevator. The drive from my penthouse to my office building took exactly 8 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. They had early flights to Cabo. They calculated the exact time to drop the kids off so they could speed to the airport and pass through security before anyone could stop them. They thought they had trapped me. They figured that because I was a professional woman, I would be too embarrassed to cause a scene at my own workplace. They assumed I would quietly collect my nieces and nephews, take them home, and play the obedient caregiver just to avoid a public scandal. They were dead wrong. I pulled into the underground parking garage, my tires screeching against the concrete, and marched straight into the grand marble lobby of my building. The scene that greeted me was absolutely surreal. The Sterling Building is a high-security, ultra-exclusive financial hub. You do not get past the front doors without an appointment and a keycard. And right there, sitting on the imported Italian leather sofas reserved for waiting executives, were my brother's kids. 8-year-old Leo was clutching his worn backpack, looking terrified. Beside him, the 4-year-old twins were crying softly, their faces sticky with whatever cheap breakfast Chloe had shoved into their hands. 2-year-old Mia was sitting on the floor wailing for her mother. 3 security guards and 2 uniformed police officers were standing in a circle around them, looking completely bewildered. Aunt Maya, Leo called out, his voice cracking the moment he saw me. He jumped up and ran to me, wrapping his small arms around my waist. The other kids immediately followed, clinging to my coat. My heart broke for them. They were innocent pawns in their parents' sick, twisted game of entitlement. But my sympathy for the children did not dilute the absolute inferno of rage I felt toward Marcus and Chloe. Officer Daniels approached me, looking me up and down. "Are you the aunt?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice steady. I knelt down to Leo's level. He reached into his pocket and handed me a crumpled piece of pink stationery. "Mommy said to give this to you," he whispered, wiping his nose. I stood back up and unfolded the paper. It was written in Chloe's distinct, loopy handwriting. The note read, "Family steps up when family is in need. Enjoy your training camp. See you in 2 weeks. Do not forget the twins are allergic to peanuts. Have fun." There was a smiley face drawn at the bottom. A literal smiley face. I stared at the pink paper, reading the words over and over again, letting the sheer audacity of it burn into my memory. Officer Daniels cleared his throat. "Ma'am, the security footage shows a black Range Rover pulling up to the curb." The adults unloaded the children and their bags, pushed them through the revolving doors, and sped off. The front desk guard tried to stop them, but they ignored him. "Do you want to take the children home now, or do we need to contact another relative?" That was the moment of decision. The old Maya, the one who had spent her entire life trying to prove her worth to a family that despised her, would have gathered the children, apologized to the officers for the inconvenience, and dragged 4 kids back to her pristine apartment. The old Maya would have suffered in silence for 2 weeks, exhausted and resentful, while her brothers sipped margaritas on a beach. But the old Maya was dead. I looked at the police officer. I looked at the security cameras pointing directly at the lobby doors. Then I looked at the terrified children clutching my coat. I love my nieces and nephews, but if I took them home right now, Marcus and Chloe would learn that there are no consequences for their actions. They would learn that they could abuse me, manipulate me, and break the law, and I would always clean up their mess. In our community, calling the authorities on your own family is considered the ultimate betrayal. You are supposed to handle things in-house. You are supposed to protect your own, cover up their flaws, and bear the burden in silence. But that toxic loyalty is exactly what allowed Marcus to become an arrogant, entitled golden child. It was the same toxic loyalty that allowed Chloe, a white woman who loved to weaponize our family's culture when it suited her, to treat me like the help. I refused to play the game anymore. Let the system handle them. I took a slow, calculated breath. Officer Daniels, I said clearly, ensuring my voice carried across the quiet lobby. I am not taking them home. I cannot. The officer blinked clearly, taken aback. Excuse me? He asked. I handed him the pink sticky note. My brother and his wife just abandoned their 4 minor children in a commercial building. I did not consent to watch them. I am a single woman working a demanding corporate job. I do not have the legal authority, the equipment, or the consent to act as their guardian for 2 weeks. This is child abandonment. The officer stared at the note, then looked back at me. Ma'am, if you refuse to take them, I have to call Child Protective Services. These children will be placed in emergency state custody until we can locate the parents. Are you sure you want to do that? They are your family. I felt a pang of guilt as Leo looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes, but I swallowed it down. I knelt beside him and gently squeezed his shoulders. I am not going to let anyone take you away to a scary place, Leo, I promised him softly. But I need the police to do their job so your mom and dad learn a very important lesson. I stood back up and faced the officer, my expression like stone. Call Child Protective Services, I instructed him. And I want to file a formal police report for child abandonment and reckless endangerment against Marcus and Chloe. I want you to pull the security footage of their license plate. They are currently en route to the international terminal at the airport for a flight to Cabo. If you hurry, you can intercept them before they board. The officers exchanged a look, finally realizing I was entirely serious. One of them stepped away to make a call on his radio. I stayed in the lobby, sitting on the leather sofa with my nieces and nephews, buying them hot chocolate from the lobby cafe while we waited for the social workers to arrive. I made sure the kids felt safe and comforted, reassuring them that everything was going to be all right. But mentally, I was preparing for war. Within an hour, a social worker arrived. Because I was a verified, stable relative with no criminal record, the social worker allowed me to sign emergency temporary guardianship papers. This meant the children would not have to go to a foster home, they could come stay with me. But the crucial part was that the legal process had been triggered. By officially routing the children through Child Protective Services, a formal criminal investigation was opened against Marcus and Chloe for abandoning minors. The state was now involved, and a paper trail existed. I took the kids back to my penthouse, ordered a massive breakfast delivery, and set them up with movies in the guest suite. Then my phone began to vibrate violently. It was my mother. The police had contacted my parents as the emergency contacts listed on Marcus's profile. When I answered the phone, I had to pull the device away from my ear. "What is wrong with you?" my mother shrieked, her voice echoing through my kitchen. "Desmond, get the car." "Maya, have you lost your mind? You called the police on your own brother. The authorities just called us saying Marcus and Chloe are being detained at the airport. They missed their flight. You are tearing this family apart over a babysitting favor." I leaned against my kitchen counter, watching the city skyline through my floor-to-ceiling windows. "No, Mom," I said calmly. "I reported a crime. They left a 2-year-old in a public lobby. You always praised Marcus for being so smart, but today he was incredibly stupid." "You malicious, jealous girl," she spat. "You have always hated him because he became a doctor, and you just count other people's money. We paid for his medical school. We sacrificed everything for him to be a success, and you are trying to ruin his career over your own selfishness. We are coming to your office right now, and you better have those children ready to hand over." "They are at my apartment under state-mandated temporary custody," I corrected her. "And if you show up here screaming, I will have building security escort you out. Actions have consequences, Mom." Marcus is finally about to learn his. I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the kitchen counter, letting the silence of my penthouse wash over me. The storm I had just unleashed was going to be biblical, but I felt nothing but absolute clarity. The Child Protective Services caseworker, a pragmatic woman named Sarah, arrived shortly after to finalize the temporary guardianship paperwork and conduct the mandatory home evaluation. Once she was settled in the guest wing with the children, who were now happily distracted by cartoons and a mountain of pancakes, I knew I had to complete the legal process. I changed out of my robe and into a sharp, charcoal pantsuit strapped on my heels and headed straight back to the Sterling building. The detectives needed my formal authorization to release the lobby security footage to the district attorney, and I intended to hand it over personally. I was sitting in the ground floor security office watching the high-definition playback of Marcus and Chloe shoving their own children through the revolving doors when the front desk guard knocked on the glass. He looked incredibly uncomfortable. He informed me that my parents were currently in the main lobby, screaming at the receptionists and demanding to be led upstairs to my firm. They were causing a massive scene, threatening to call the news stations, and claiming I had kidnapped their grandchildren. I did not panic. I simply thanked the detective, signed the release forms, and instructed the security guard to escort my parents up to Conference Room B on the 50th floor. If they wanted a war, we were going to have it on my turf, surrounded by soundproof glass and mahogany tables. By the time I stepped out of the private elevator and walked into the conference room, the air was thick with tension. My mother was pacing the length of the room, clutching her designer handbag. Like a weapon, her face twisted into an ugly mask of rage. My father Desmond stood by the window, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. The moment the heavy wooden door clicked shut behind me, my mother lunged forward, pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. Marcus is sitting in a holding cell at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Chloe is having a hysterical breakdown in police custody. They missed their flight. They lost their non-refundable resort deposit. And now they are facing felony charges. You have ruined your brother's life over a temper tantrum. I walked calmly to the head of the conference table, pulled out a leather chair, and sat down. I smoothed out the files in front of me before looking up at her. "I did not ruin his life, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone entirely conversational. "Marcus ruined his own life the second he decided to abandon 4 toddlers in a commercial building. I simply refused to be an accomplice to his crime." My father slammed his fists onto the table, leaning over to intimidate me, just like he did when I was a teenager. "You call the police and tell them this was a misunderstanding," he barked. "You tell them you forgot you were supposed to watch the kids today. You will tell them whatever it takes to get those charges dropped right now. Marcus is a respected physician in this city. A criminal record will destroy his medical license. He will lose everything." I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. "That sounds like a Marcus problem," I said flatly, "not a Maya problem. Furthermore, it is entirely out of my hands. I do not press criminal charges, the state of Georgia does. Child abandonment and reckless endangerment are felonies. The district attorney already has the security footage of them literally running away from their crying 2-year-old. There is no magical phone call you can force me to make that will erase video evidence." My mother let out a sound of pure disgust. She grabbed the back of the nearest chair, her knuckles turning white. "You planned this," she spat. "You have been waiting for a moment to tear him down because you are so incredibly bitter. You have always been jealous of his success. You sit up here in this fancy glass office counting other people's money, pretending you are so important, but you are nothing but a glorified bookkeeper. Marcus saves lives. He is a surgeon. He is the pride of this family, and you are just the daughter who counts pennies." Her words were meant to cut me to the bone, but they only exposed the deep, rotting core of our family dynamic. I looked at the 2 people who had brought me into this world, the people who had systematically drained my self-worth to build up my brother's ego. "I am not jealous of Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I actually pity him, because he is a 35-year-old man who still needs his mommy and daddy to bully his little sister into cleaning up his messes." My mother's eyes widened in fury. "Do not you dare speak to us about messes," she yelled, taking a step toward me. "We sacrificed everything for that boy. Everything. Do you know what it took to get him through medical school? We took out a second mortgage on our house. We drained your father's retirement accounts. We paid for his luxury apartment during his residency so he would not be stressed. We bought Chloe that massive engagement ring because Marcus needed to look successful to her family. We poured every single drop of our wealth into making sure he had the perfect life. She was hyperventilating now, completely losing control of her pristine church lady facade. "And what did you do?" she continued to scream. "You took out loans. You went to a state school. We told you to handle your own finances because you were just getting a business degree. It was a backup plan. You were supposed to graduate, get a quiet desk job, and support your brother when he needed it. You were supposed to be the safety net for his greatness. Instead, you hoarded your money, bought a penthouse, and turned your back on the very people who gave you life." The sheer audacity of her confession hung in the air. For years, they had gaslit me into believing that they simply could not afford to help me with college. I spent my early 20s eating ramen noodles, working 3 jobs, and drowning in student debt, crying myself to sleep from exhaustion. All while they were secretly funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into Marcus's bank account so he could drive a BMW and play the role of the wealthy doctor. They had literally bankrupted their own future to fund his vanity, and they fully expected me to act as his unpaid servant to balance the scales. I stood up slowly, picking up my briefcase. "It is absolutely fascinating to hear you admit that out loud," I said, staring directly into my mother's eyes. "You crippled your own retirement to buy Marcus a life he cannot actually afford. You know as well as I do that he makes $300,000 a year and is still drowning in debt because Chloe demands country club memberships and designer clothes. You created a monster who thinks the rules do not apply to him, and now you are furious because the real world just handed him a bill he cannot pay." My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "If you do not fix this, Maya, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You will be completely cut off. No holidays, no family support, nothing. You will have no one." I let out a sharp, genuine laugh. It echoed loudly in the quiet conference room. "Dad, you cut me off the day you decided my future was not worth investing a single dime into. You cut me off when you watched me struggle to pay for textbooks while you bought your golden boy a sports car. The only thing you provide me with now is high blood pressure and an endless stream of disrespect. I am not losing a family today. I am shedding a liability." I walked toward the heavy glass doors, pausing just as my hand touched the handle. "By the way," I added, looking back over my shoulder at their stunned faces, "the state will be holding a custody hearing on Monday to determine the long-term placement of the children while Marcus and Chloe deal with their felony charges." As a financially stable relative with no criminal record, the caseworker has already informed me that I am the prime candidate for permanent guardianship. If you want to see your grandchildren anytime soon, I highly suggest you change your tone. Because right now I am the only thing standing between those kids and the foster care system. I pushed the door open and walked out, leaving them trapped in the soundproof room. I could see my mother collapsing into one of the leather chairs through the glass, burying her face in her hands, while my father stood paralyzed by the window. I did not feel an ounce of guilt. I straightened my posture, walked past the bewildered receptionists, and headed back to the private elevator. The war had officially started, but I was holding all the leverage, and I was going to make sure they felt every single consequence of the monster they had created. I walked back into my penthouse, the heavy oak doors sealing away the chaos of the outside world. The children were asleep in the guest wing, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the day. For a brief moment, the quiet illusion of peace settled over my home. That illusion shattered exactly 40 minutes later. My phone vibrated against the marble kitchen island. It was not my parents or the police. It was Linda, my executive assistant. She sent a single text message with an urgent priority flag and a link to a social media platform. I tapped the screen and my sister-in-law's tear-streaked face filled my display. Chloe had wasted absolutely no time. The background of the video showed the unmistakable gray concrete pillars of the airport pickup zone. She and Marcus had just been released on bail, and instead of calling a lawyer or staying silent, Chloe turned on her camera to broadcast her performance to the world. Her blonde hair was deliberately messy. Her mascara was dramatically smudged beneath her eyes. She clutched her designer sweater tightly around her shoulders, playing the perfect picture of a terrified, victimized mother. "Please help us." Chloe sobbed into the camera, her voice catching in a masterful display of manufactured trauma. My husband and I are living an absolute nightmare. We were supposed to be taking a short, desperately needed trip before our fifth baby arrives. We left our children with my husband's sister Maya. We trusted her. But she is a deeply disturbed, lonely woman who has always been jealous of our beautiful, diverse family. I watched in grim fascination as Chloe spun a web of absolute fiction. She claimed they had a firm verbal agreement for me to babysit. She cried that I had lured them into a false sense of security, only to call the police the moment they drove away, falsely accusing them of abandonment, just so I could steal her babies. She weaponized every stereotype she could grab. She painted herself as the loving, persecuted mother and me as the bitter, childless career woman who wanted to destroy her brother's happiness out of pure spite. She used her corporate connections to have us arrested like common criminals, Chloe wailed, turning the camera slightly to show Marcus standing behind her. He looked appropriately devastated, staring at the ground and shaking his head. Now my babies are in the hands of a vindictive, unstable woman. Please share this video. Help us get our children back from this monster. She ended the broadcast, but the damage was already accelerating at a terrifying speed. The video had been live for less than an hour, but the view count was climbing by the thousands every minute. Chloe knew exactly how to manipulate the internet algorithm. The tears of an expectant mother claiming her children were stolen by a wealthy, malicious relative was digital gold. My notifications began to explode. The comment section under her video was a cesspool of vitriol directed entirely at me. Strangers from across the country were calling for my arrest, demanding I be investigated, and wishing horrifying things upon me. But the digital mob did not stop there. My professional email inbox started filling up with aggressive messages. My wealth management firm's business page was suddenly hit with a barrage of one-star reviews from people who had never set foot in my office. They called me a kidnapper, a sociopath, and a disgrace. My firm catered to elite clients who valued absolute discretion and pristine public images. A scandal of this magnitude plastered across social media was exactly the kind of liability that could trigger mass withdrawals from my portfolio. Marcus and Chloe knew this. They were trying to hit me where they thought it would hurt the most, attempting to burn my livelihood to the ground to force my surrender. Then came the calls from our local community. The tight-knit church circle my parents belonged to mobilized instantly. My phone lit up with texts from deacons, choir members, and distant relatives. They had seen the video. They bought the narrative completely. Messages condemned me for dragging our family business into the public eye, for disrespecting my brother, and for shaming our community. In their eyes, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had broken ranks. I had exposed a golden son to the legal system, and worse, I had allowed his wife to publicly humiliate our family dynamics on the internet. Any normal person would have panicked. I watched the notifications flash across my screen, threatening everything I had built over the last decade. But I did not feel panic. I felt a cold, calculating calm wash over me. Chloe's video was not a fatal blow. It was a spectacular, self-incriminating miscalculation. I did not reply to a single hateful message. I did not take to social media to defend myself or engage in a public shouting match. Instead, I connected my phone to my secure server. I downloaded the video in its highest resolution. I took screenshots of her captions, the timestamps, and the location tags. Chloe had just publicly documented that she and Marcus were indeed at the airport attempting to flee the state, perfectly corroborating the police timeline. She had publicly admitted that the children were not with them when they tried to board an international flight. I forwarded the entire digital package directly to my lawyer and the Child Protective Services caseworker assigned to the children. In family court, judges do not look kindly upon parents facing felony abandonment charges who immediately turn to social media to incite a digital mob against the temporary guardian of their children. Chloe thought she was rallying an army. In reality, she was handing me the exact ammunition I needed to prove they were entirely unfit, erratic, and prioritizing public spectacle over the privacy and safety of their kids. Just as I finished transferring the files, a text message from Marcus popped up on my screen. His tone had shifted from the arrogant golden boy to a desperate cornered animal. "You see what is happening out there, Maya," he wrote. "The internet is tearing you apart. Your clients are going to see this. Your reputation is done. Drop the charges, tell the police it was a misunderstanding, and bring my kids to mom's house right now. If you fix this, Chloe will take the video down. Do not ruin your own life just to spite me." I read his hollow threat and actually smiled. He still believed he held the power. He still believed his reputation was a shield, and my career was my vulnerability. He did not understand that I had already factored their desperation into my equation. I turned off my phone, notifications, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, and walked down the hall to check on my nieces and nephews. They were sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the digital firestorm their parents had ignited outside these walls. I pulled a blanket over Leo's shoulders and turned off the lamp. Let Chloe cry to her internet audience. Let Marcus issue his empty threats. The court of public opinion meant absolutely nothing compared to a federal courtroom. I was not going to fight them in the comment section. I was going to destroy them on paper. Sunday morning arrived with the heavy, humid heat typical of Atlanta. I did not hide. I put on my sharpest ivory suit, pinned my hair back flawlessly, and drove to the sanctuary our family had attended for 3 generations. I knew Chloe's video had circulated through the pews. I could feel the weight of 100 judgmental stares burning into my back the moment I walked through the heavy oak doors. Whispers rippled through the congregation like a sudden breeze, harsh and unforgiving. I took my usual seat near the front, keeping my spine completely straight. I was not going to cower. I had committed no sin, and I refused to let them shame me out of my own community. As soon as the final benediction was pronounced, the trap was sprung. Deacon Hayes, a man who had known me since I was in pigtails, stepped directly into the aisle, physically blocking my exit. He placed a heavy paternal hand on my shoulder and guided me toward the back corridors. "Your parents need a word with you in the fellowship hall, Maya," he said, his tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. "It is time to heal this division before the devil takes root in this family." I walked into the fellowship hall, and the heavy wooden doors immediately clicked shut behind me. The space was small, dimly lit, and suffocatingly crowded. The atmosphere was instantly oppressive. The room felt like it was shifting, the walls closing in, as people took turns stepping into my personal space. Every time I turned my head, another accusing face filled my vision. It was a chaotic, dizzying barrage of aggressive body language and judgmental glares. My mother Beatrice stood at the center, clutching her Bible like a weapon. Beside her was my father Desmond, his jaw set in a rigid line of fury. Marcus and Chloe were there too, out on bail, looking perfectly styled to play the roles of exhausted, persecuted victims. Chloe was actually leaning heavily against Marcus, clutching her stomach to emphasize her pregnancy. Flanking them were 3 of the most influential elders in our church community. They formed a tight, inescapable circle around me. Deacon Hayes opened the ambush with a lengthy prayer about forgiveness, prodigal children, and the sacred bond of family. The moment he said amen, my father stepped forward, invading my personal space. He did not ask how his grandchildren were doing. He did not ask how I was holding up after the nightmare of Friday morning. He shoved a crumpled legal document onto the folding table between us. "You have made your point, Maya," my father barked, his voice vibrating with suppressed rage. "You humiliated your brother. You embarrassed this family in front of the entire congregation. Now it ends. You are going to sign this affidavit of non-prosecution. You are going to tell the district attorney that you overreacted, that you gave Marcus permission to leave the children with you, and that you want all charges dropped immediately." I looked down at the paper, then up at the circle of accusing eyes pressing in on me. "I did not overreact," I replied smoothly, refusing to raise my voice. "Marcus committed a felony. I am not perjuring myself to save a 35-year-old man from the consequences of child abandonment." My mother gasped loudly, stepping forward to flank my father. "How can you be so venomous?" she cried out, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He is your own flesh and blood. You know exactly what the justice system does to Black men in this country. You are handing your own brother over to be destroyed by the state over a simple misunderstanding. Elder Thomas, a man whose opinion carried the weight of law in our community, stepped closer, his imposing figure looming over me. Maya, we do not handle our business by calling the police on our own men, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You are tearing the fabric of this community apart. We handle things in-house, with prayer, with grace, and with family unity. You need to drop this foolish crusade before you ruin his medical career. I stared at Elder Thomas, then shifted my gaze to my mother. The sheer hypocrisy was breathtaking. Where was this grace when I was eating plain rice for dinner to pay for my textbooks while Marcus was driving a luxury sedan bought with Dad's retirement money? I asked, my voice cutting through the heavy air like ice. The system is not destroying Marcus. His own arrogance is. He chose to dump his children in a commercial lobby. I simply refused to be his accomplice. That was when Chloe decided to make her move. She pushed past my brother, stepping directly into my line of sight. She wiped a fabricated tear from her cheek, weaponizing her fragile white woman tears in a room full of people who were already primed to hate me. Maya, you have traumatized my babies, Chloe sobbed, her voice trembling with practiced theatricality. They spent hours terrified in the hands of strangers and social workers because of your vindictive phone call. We are trying to heal as a family. We are trying to move past this nightmare you caused. But Marcus and I cannot heal in our current environment. The stress of this legal battle and the public scrutiny is threatening my pregnancy. My doctor says I need absolute peace and security. I watched her perform, waiting for the punchline. I knew Chloe well enough to know that her tears always came with a price tag attached. We need a safe space to recover from the damage you have inflicted on us. Chloe continued, lifting her chin to look at me with pure, unadulterated entitlement. Your penthouse. It has 24-hour security, it has the space we need for the children, and it is the least you can do to compensate us for the emotional distress you have caused my family. You are single. You do not need 5,000 square feet of luxury all to yourself. We do. Sign the waiver, dropping the charges, hand over the keys to your apartment until the baby is born, and I will take down the video. I will even make a public statement saying we have reconciled. Total silence fell over the claustrophobic room. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The sheer breathtaking audacity of her demand actually left me momentarily speechless. She was not just trying to escape felony charges, she was actively extorting me. She felt entirely entitled to the home I had bought with my own blood, sweat, and tears simply because she had managed to reproduce 5 times and I had chosen a career. I looked at my parents, expecting them to surely draw the line at this insane demand. Instead, my father nodded along. It is a fair compromise to keep this family intact, Desmond said gruffly. You owe them a safe harbor after what you put them through. It is time you contributed something useful to this family, instead of just hoarding your wealth. I looked around the dizzying circle of faces, the elders nodding in agreement, my mother crossing her arms in self-righteous triumph, Marcus standing behind his wife, a smug, victorious smirk playing on his lips. They honestly believed they had broken me. They believed that by cornering me in the church, surrounded by the crushing weight of community expectation and family guilt, I would surrender my home and my dignity just to belong to them. My analytical mind, the same mind that managed billions of dollars in elite assets, kicked into high gear. I was not looking at my family anymore. I was looking at hostile negotiators who had just revealed their bottom line. Arguing with them here would achieve nothing but giving them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my composure. I needed to set the hook for the trap I was already building. I let out a slow, measured breath. I let my shoulders drop slightly, mimicking the posture of a woman who had finally been worn down by the relentless pressure. I looked down at the floor, then slowly brought my eyes up to meet Chloe's triumphant gaze. I offered her a chilling, serene smile. You want my penthouse as compensation? I asked, my voice soft and defeated. I looked at Chloe, then at Marcus, and finally at my parents. I understand, I really do. You have made your positions incredibly clear today. My mother let out a loud exhale of relief. Praise God, she muttered, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her grasp smoothly. However, I continued raising my hand to pause the celebration. I am a wealth manager. I do not sign binding legal affidavits or agree to real estate transfers on a folding table in a church basement. That is not how business is done. If we are doing this, we are doing it correctly. I will let the lawyers handle the property discussions and the legal waivers. I will be in touch tomorrow to arrange a formal meeting. Chloe's smirk widened. She honestly thought she had won. She thought she had bullied me out of my own home. That sounds perfectly reasonable, Maya, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I am glad you finally understand the importance of family. I did not say another word. I turned on my heel, the circle of elders parting to let me through. I walked out of the suffocating fellowship hall, out of the church, and stepped into the blinding afternoon sun. I slipped on my sunglasses, walked to my car, and drove away. They thought they had secured a luxury penthouse and their freedom. They had no idea that they had just given me the exact ammunition I needed to utterly destroy them. They wanted to negotiate property. I was going to gladly give them a lesson in real estate they would never, ever forget. The interior of my car was a sanctuary of chilled air and absolute silence. The moment the heavy doors of the church fellowship hall slammed shut behind me, the suffocating pressure of their expectations vanished. I did not speed away in a fit of rage. I drove through the sun-drenched streets of Atlanta with the precision and calm of a predator that had just successfully cornered its prey. Chloe thought she had executed a masterclass in manipulation. My parents thought they had successfully whipped their rebellious daughter back into submission. They were all so blinded by their own arrogance that they failed to realize they had just handed me the keys to their complete destruction. I bypassed my penthouse and drove straight back to the Sterling building. It was Sunday afternoon and the financial district was essentially a ghost town. The high-speed elevator whisked me up to my office in total solitude. I walked past the empty reception desk, the glass-walled conference rooms, and stepped into my private suite. I dropped my bag onto the leather sofa, walked over to my desk, and powered up my encrypted workstation. I did not need to cry. I did not need to vent. I needed to execute. I picked up my secure line and dialed the direct cell phone number of my chief accountant, Elias. He was a brilliant, meticulous man who handled the deepest, most complex layers of my personal wealth portfolio. He knew every asset, every blind trust, and every corporate shell company I operated. He picked up on the second ring. "Good afternoon, Maya." "Elias," said his voice crisp and professional, despite the weekend hour. "I saw the news alerts and the ridiculous social media circus involving your brother. Do we need to initiate crisis management protocols for the firm?" "No, Elias," I replied, staring out at the sprawling Atlanta skyline. "The firm is perfectly insulated. What I need right now is for you to open the encrypted drive and pull up the complete financial dossier for Horizon Holdings, LLC. There was a brief pause on the line. I could hear the rapid clicking of his keyboard. Horizon Holdings. He repeated, his tone shifting from professional concern to sharp curiosity. "Are we finally pulling the trigger on the suburban property?" "We are," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. Chloe just attempted to extort me in a church basement. She demanded that I sign a waiver dropping the felony child abandonment charges against them. In exchange, she graciously offered to take down her defamatory videos, but only if I surrender my penthouse to them as compensation for her supposed emotional distress. She wants a formal legal meeting tomorrow to handle the property transfer. Elias let out a sharp, genuine laugh. He knew exactly what kind of financial quicksand Marcus and Chloe were drowning in. "The sheer audacity of her demanding your penthouse while living in her current situation is absolutely staggering," he noted. "Shall I prepare the eviction notices?" "Yes," I commanded. "I want the deed of trust, the original foreclosure documents, and the formal eviction notice drafted and printed on high-weight legal paper. Have them bound in a presentation folder. I want everything bulletproof." To the rest of the world, Marcus and Chloe lived a picture-perfect, wealthy lifestyle. They resided in a sprawling 6-bedroom mansion in a gated suburban community. It had a manicured lawn, a 3-car garage, and a sweeping staircase where Chloe took endless photos of her designer outfits for social media. My parents constantly bragged about Marcus's beautiful estate, using it as absolute proof of his superiority as a highly paid physician. But the numbers never lie. 3 years ago, Marcus was drowning. His medical salary, while substantial, was completely devoured by Chloe's relentless spending habits, their luxury car leases, and the crushing weight of his private student loans. He had maxed out his credit cards trying to maintain the illusion of extreme wealth. Eventually, the facade cracked. Marcus missed 6 consecutive mortgage payments. The bank initiated formal foreclosure proceedings on their pristine suburban mansion. My parents could not bail him out. They had already drained their retirement accounts and taken out a second mortgage on their own home just to get him through medical school and fund his lavish wedding. Marcus was exactly 3 weeks away from being publicly evicted. The golden child was about to be exposed as a financial fraud to his entire country club circle. He had come to me begging for a massive loan. He cried in my office, swearing he would pay me back, promising he would control Chloe's spending. But I knew my brother. Giving him a direct loan would be throwing money into a black hole. He would never pay me back, and my parents would demand I forgive the debt because we were family. I refused to hand him cash. Instead, I made a much smarter investment. I utilized a shell company, Horizon Holdings, LLC, to anonymously purchase his distressed debt directly from the bank. I paid off the arrears, bought the mortgage note, and legally acquired the deed to the property. Through a third-party corporate attorney, Horizon Holdings offered Marcus a highly restrictive confidential lease agreement. Marcus was allowed to stay in the house paying rent directly to the LLC. Marcus eagerly signed the papers, desperate to hide his failure from Chloe and our parents. He told everyone, including his wife, that he had brilliantly negotiated a miraculous restructuring deal with a private equity firm. He puffed out his chest and played the financial genius. He had absolutely no idea that the faceless corporate landlord he paid rent to every month was actually his little sister. For 3 years, Chloe had been hosting lavish dinner parties, filming home tours and bragging about her real estate prowess inside a house that legally belonged to me. She had spent hours looking down her nose at me, mocking my single status and treating me like the family servant, all while standing on my hardwood floors under my roof. And now, in a supreme twist of poetic justice, this deeply entitled woman was demanding I hand over my penthouse because she felt she deserved a safe space. She wanted to play real estate mogul. I was going to gladly oblige her. Make sure the eviction notice gives them the absolute minimum time frame legally required by the state of Georgia to vacate the premises, I instructed Elias, my voice devoid of any sympathy. Once they are charged with felony child abandonment, their income will dry up instantly. I am not letting them squat in my property while they fight the criminal justice system. Understood, Elias said, his keyboard clacking rapidly. I will have the entire portfolio ready for your review by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Do you want me to alert the local sheriff's department to be on standby for the eviction service? Not yet, I replied softly. I want to look them in the eye when I drop the paperwork on the table. I want to watch the exact moment Chloe realizes she does not own a single brick of that suburban palace. I want to see Marcus explain to his demanding materialistic wife that they are effectively homeless because he sold his soul to keep up appearances. I ended the call and leaned back in my ergonomic desk chair. The sun was beginning to dip below the Atlanta skyline, casting a golden, fiery light across my office. I felt a deep, resonant sense of power humming in my veins. My parents had spent my entire life trying to shrink me to make room for Marcus's ego. They had allowed Chloe to disrespect me in my own home and in my own community. They had gathered a tribunal of church elders to bully me into submission. They thought I was weak because I chose silence over shouting. They mistook my professionalism for obedience. They truly believed I was just a bitter, lonely woman who could be crushed by the threat of family excommunication. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a heavy crystal tumbler, pouring myself a small measure of aged bourbon. I raised the glass to the empty room, offering a silent toast to my brother's boundless arrogance. He wanted to use my life as his personal training camp. He wanted to dump his responsibilities at my feet and fly off to a tropical beach. He wanted his wife to extort me from my primary residence. I took a slow sip of the bourbon, letting the warmth settle in my chest. The trap was set perfectly. The jaws were primed to snap shut. Tomorrow I was going to host a masterclass in wealth management, and my family was going to pay the ultimate tuition fee. I turned back to my computer screens, ready to prepare the second level of my retaliation. Because the truth about the house was only the first secret I was keeping, and the next revelation was going to destroy my parents completely. Monday morning arrived with crisp, unforgiving efficiency. I stepped into my office at exactly 7:30. Elias, my chief accountant, was already waiting by my desk. He handed me a thick black leather folder containing the deed of trust and the formal eviction notice for my brother's house. I placed it gently on the edge of my mahogany desk. The paper trap was ready. Before Elias could brief me on the morning market fluctuations, my receptionist buzzed my secure line. A courier had just dropped off a certified legal packet addressed directly to me, marked urgent and confidential. It was from a strip mall law firm I barely recognized, the kind of discount legal service Marcus probably hired in a desperate panic over the weekend. I instructed the receptionist to bring it in immediately. I sliced the heavy envelope open with a silver letter opener. Inside was a formal demand letter drafted by Chloe and Marcus's attorney, accompanied by a personal statement signed by Chloe herself. They actually believed that their little church ambush had worked. They genuinely thought I had folded under the pressure of our community elders and was simply waiting for their instructions on how to surrender my assets. I read the first page and had to force myself to remain seated. The level of delusion was astronomical. The legal document formally outlined the terms under which Marcus and Chloe would supposedly forgive me for my egregious actions and allow me to remain a part of their lives. Item 1 demanded the immediate transfer of the deed to my downtown penthouse into a trust controlled by Chloe, citing her need for a stress-free environment during her high-risk pregnancy. Item 2 mandated that I establish a fully funded educational trust for all 5 of their children, requiring an immediate initial deposit of $500,000. Item 3 was a demand for a guaranteed monthly stipend of $5,000 to cover their lifestyle maintenance and the emotional distress I had allegedly caused them by involving the police. But the true masterpiece of this delivery was the attached personal statement written by Chloe. She could not resist the urge to have the last word. She needed to put her sense of superiority into writing. Her letter was dripping with the kind of condescending, thinly veiled discrimination she had been getting away with for years. She wrote that I should consider it an absolute privilege to contribute to her family. She explicitly stated that a white woman of her pedigree marrying into our family had elevated our social standing, and that I, as an unmarried black woman with no legacy of my own, had a duty to serve the greater good of their diverse household. She actually typed the words that I should know my place and be grateful she was willing to overlook my aggressive and uncooperative nature. I slid the letter across the desk to Elias. He read it in silence, his eyes widening with every paragraph. He looked up at me completely astounded. "They put an extortion attempt in writing and sent it through a certified courier," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "This is documented blackmail. If you do not comply, they are threatening continued public defamation and emotional leverage. The lawyer who drafted this is going to lose his license, and Chloe just handed the district attorney a motive for her online harassment." I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. Chloe had pressed the pen so hard the paper was practically indented. She was so blinded by her own privilege that she failed to realize the legal gravity of what she had just done. In the state of Georgia, demanding property and money under the threat of continued public defamation or legal harassment is a textbook definition of extortion. Sending it through a certified courier service elevates it to a federal offense. I instructed Elias to scan every single page into our secure encrypted servers. I wanted 3 physical copies made and placed in my fireproof safe. Then I forwarded the digital scans directly to the Child Protective Services caseworker and the lead detective assigned to their felony abandonment case. Chloe thought she was establishing dominance. Instead, she had just provided the state with irrefutable written proof of her deeply unstable, manipulative, and extortionate behavior. She had proven that she viewed her own children not as human beings to be cared for, but as bargaining chips to squeeze money out of her relatives. I thought back to the church basement, to the way my mother and father had nodded along as Chloe made her ridiculous demands. They had fully endorsed this. They had stood by and watched a woman disrespect their own daughter entirely because they valued the aesthetic of a successful son over the reality of a toxic one. My parents had spent my entire life telling me I needed to work twice as hard to get half as far in this world. Yet when Marcus married someone who clearly viewed our family as beneath her, they rolled out the red carpet and handed her a blank check. I picked up my secure line and called my corporate attorney, a razor-sharp litigator named Jessica. I did not need her to file a response to the demand letter. I simply needed her to be prepared for the grand finale. I read Chloe's personal statement to Jessica over the phone. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Are you telling me this woman actually put her racial superiority complex and an extortion demand in the same notarized packet? Jessica asked, her voice laced with professional disbelief. She absolutely did, I confirmed. She genuinely believes she is untouchable. She thinks because she has a crying video on the internet and my parents backing her up, the law does not apply to her. I need you to run a full deep dive audit on Marcus's entire financial history immediately. If Chloe is this desperate for cash, and Marcus was willing to abandon his children to escape his reality, there has to be more hiding in his ledgers. Jessica agreed, promising to put her best forensic accountants on it right away. She knew exactly what I was looking for. The first secret was the foreclosed house, but my gut told me Marcus was hiding something much darker. A man does not abandon his entire life just for a 2-week vacation. He runs because he is being chased. I hung up the phone and looked out my window at the bustling city below. The morning traffic was crawling along the sun-baked asphalt. People were rushing to their jobs, living their lives completely unaware of the absolute destruction I was quietly organizing from my glass tower. Marcus and Chloe were sitting in their foreclosed mansion right now, likely popping a bottle of expensive champagne they bought with stolen credit, celebrating their impending wealth. They were picking out new furniture for my penthouse. They were planning how to spend my money. I gathered the original extortion documents, slid them back into their thick envelope, and placed them directly next to the eviction notice. The trap was fully set. The prey had gleefully locked themselves inside and handed me the key. All I had to do now was wait for Jessica's financial audit to clear, and then I would invite them all to the most expensive, devastating dinner of their lives. The morning after Chloe's absurd demand letter arrived, the atmosphere in my office was electric with focused intensity. Elias had barely slept, his eyes red-rimmed behind his wire-framed glasses, but his posture was rigid with professional adrenaline. I sat at my desk, my coffee growing cold, as the true scale of my brother's deception was finally laid bare. The slow pan across the scattered financial documents felt surreal, a terrifying descent into the darkest corners of Marcus's fabricated life. It was not just the foreclosed mansion. That was merely the surface symptom of a much deeper, far more malignant financial cancer. The truth buried beneath layers of obfuscation and desperate borrowing was that Marcus was not simply a man living beyond his means. He was a criminal architect of his own destruction. My financial investigation team, spearheaded by the relentless precision of Jessica's forensic accountants, had unearthed a truth so shocking it momentarily stole the breath from my lungs. Marcus had not just ruined his own financial future, he had methodically, deliberately pillaged the very foundation of our family's security. He had not just borrowed money, he had stolen it, and his victim was the man who had sacrificed everything for his success. The documents spread across my desk were a testament to his desperation and his breathtaking arrogance. They detailed a labyrinthine network of predatory loans, high-interest credit lines, and shadowy financial instruments, all bearing a name that was not his. He had not used his own pristine credit score built on the back of my parents' sacrifices to fund Chloe's insatiable demands. He had used our father's. Desmond, the proud patriarch who had mortgaged his retirement and his peace of mind to ensure his golden son's ascension, was now unknowingly sitting on a powder keg of debt. Marcus had utilized his father's social security number, his financial history, and his pristine credit rating to secure hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans. He had forged signatures, falsified documents, and systematically drained the very lifeblood of the man who had championed him above all else. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The irony was suffocating. My father, who had spent his entire life lecturing me about responsibility, about knowing my place, about sacrificing for the greater good of the family, was completely oblivious to the fact that his beloved son had just handed him a financial death sentence. Marcus had traded his father's security for country club memberships, designer handbags, and the illusion of a perfect life. I stared at the paperwork, tracing the lines of debt, the staggering interest rates, the sheer volume of stolen funds. The audacity was almost incomprehensible. Marcus had not just abandoned his children in a lobby, he had abandoned his own father to financial ruin, all while accepting the accolades and adoration of the very man he was destroying. Elias broke the heavy silence. "The extent of the identity theft is staggering, Maya," he said, his voice low and tight. "He's been doing this for years. The initial loans were small, perhaps to cover temporary shortfalls, but they quickly escalated. The most recent lines of credit are predatory, the kind that target desperate individuals with no other options. He's leveraged everything, and he's done it using your father's name." I closed my eyes, the magnitude of the betrayal washing over me. The anger that had fueled my actions over the past few days morphed into something colder, sharper, and far more lethal. The golden child, the physician, the pride of the community, was a common thief. He had not just stolen money, he had stolen our family's future, and he had done it with a smile on his face and a sense of absolute entitlement. "Does my father know?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It's highly unlikely," Elias replied, shaking his head. "Marcus has been meticulously managing the correspondence, intercepting statements, and ensuring the debt collectors haven't reached Desmond yet. But it's only a matter of time. The house of cards is collapsing. Once the felony charges for abandonment become public, his medical license will be suspended, his income will evaporate, and these lenders will come calling. And they won't be calling Marcus, they'll be calling your father." The trap I had set was no longer just about the penthouse or the foreclosed mansion. It was about exposing the rot at the core of our family, about tearing down the facade that had protected Marcus his entire life. The extortion letter Chloe had sent was no longer just an arrogant demand. It was a desperate, panicked attempt to secure the only lifeline they had left. They needed my money, my property, my silence, not just to avoid the consequences of abandoning their children, but to stave off the complete and total annihilation of their fabricated lives. I picked up the file containing the evidence of the identity theft and placed it deliberately next to the extortion letter and the eviction notice. The arsenal was complete, the weapons were loaded, and the targets were blissfully unaware of the devastation that awaited them. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady and resolute, "I need you to prepare the final documents. I want everything ready. The eviction notice, the evidence of extortion, the proof of identity theft, and the financial records detailing the extent of the fraud." Jessica, who had been listening silently on the secure line, confirmed the instructions. "It will be ready, Maya. The forensic audit is complete and the evidence is irrefutable. Marcus has committed multiple federal offenses. The identity theft alone is a guaranteed prison sentence." The thought of my brother in a federal penitentiary did not evoke pity. It elicited a profound sense of justice. He had chosen this path. He had chosen to prioritize his ego and his wife's materialism over the safety of his children and the security of his parents. He had made his choices, and now he would face the consequences. I turned to Elias. "I need you to arrange a private dining room at the Capitol Grill for tomorrow evening. I want a formal invitation sent to my parents, Marcus, Chloe, and their attorney. The invitation should state that we are gathering to finalize the property transfer and discuss the terms of the settlement they demanded." Elias nodded, his expression a mixture of anticipation and professional respect. "Consider it done, Maya. The stage will be set." The stage was indeed set. The grand finale was approaching, and I was going to orchestrate it with the precision of a master conductor. They had expected me to fold, to surrender, to accept my role as the subservient caregiver and the silent financier. They had underestimated me completely. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, and my professionalism for compliance. Tomorrow night, the illusion would shatter. The golden child would be exposed as a fraud. The entitled wife would be stripped of her stolen kingdom, and my parents would finally see the true cost of their blind devotion. I was not just going to defend myself, I was going to dismantle their entire reality brick by stolen brick. And I was going to do it with a smile on my face and a glass of champagne in my hand, because revenge, when served cold and calculated, is truly the sweetest victory of all. I spent the next hour drafting the formal invitations. The wording had to be absolutely flawless. I could not leave a single margin for suspicion or doubt. I instructed Elias to send the digital courier packets directly to my parents, Marcus, Chloe, and their discount attorney. I also ensured that special, highly respectful invitations were dispatched to Elder Thomas and Deacon Hayes. I framed the message as a moment of profound family healing and spiritual reconciliation. I explicitly stated that the purpose of this formal dinner was to sign the asset transfer documents and finalize the terms of the settlement requested by my sister-in-law. It was the perfect bait, heavily seasoned with the exact kind of submission they demanded from me. I chose the private wine room at Atlas in Buckhead, a venue known throughout Atlanta for its staggering exclusivity and flawless service. It was exactly the type of establishment my mother and Chloe obsessed over, the kind of place where they could feel important, wealthy, and vastly superior to everyone else. Reserving the room on such short notice required a massive minimum spend, but I considered it a small operational expense for the sheer theatrical value it would provide. The responses rolled in with predictable, nauseating speed. Marcus's attorney confirmed their attendance within 20 minutes. My mother actually called my secure office line. I let it go to voicemail, listening later, as she left a message dripping with patronizing victory. She told me she was proud I had finally come to my senses, and that God always rewards obedience to the family hierarchy. She added that Chloe was craving lobster, so I needed to ensure the restaurant could accommodate her pregnancy cravings. The absolute entitlement was breathtaking. They were walking blindly into a financial slaughterhouse, and their biggest concern was the seafood menu. Tuesday evening arrived. I left my office early to prepare for the execution. I chose a tailored emerald green power suit, a color that commanded attention without screaming for it. I pulled my hair into a sleek structural updo and applied a bold, unapologetic red lip. I was dressing for a funeral, but it certainly was not mine. I packed the thick black leather folder Elias had prepared, feeling the heavy, undeniable weight of the evidence inside. The eviction notice, the extortion demand, the proof of identity theft, and the undeniable documentation of their multi-level fraud. I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early. The maitre d' escorted me to the private wine room. It was a gorgeous space lined from floor to ceiling, with rare vintages featuring a massive mahogany table that commanded the center of the room. I directed the staff to set the seating arrangement perfectly. I placed myself at the head of the table. I positioned my parents to my immediate right, Marcus and Chloe to my left, with their attorney and the church elders anchoring the opposite end. At exactly 7 o'clock, the heavy wooden doors swung open. My family walked in like conquering royalty. Chloe was draped in a designer maternity dress that I knew for a fact was purchased on a maxed-out credit card, tied to my father's stolen identity. Marcus wore a bespoke suit, puffing his chest out as he shook hands with Elder Thomas. My mother practically floated into the room, her chin held high, radiating the smug satisfaction of a matriarch who had successfully disciplined her unruly, rebellious child. My father looked profoundly relieved, clearly believing the nightmare of his son's felony charges was about to magically disappear. They took their seats immediately, ordering top-shelf champagne and expensive appetizers on my tab. Chloe looked around the room, her eyes gleaming with unfiltered greed. She made a loud, pointed comment to my mother about how nice it would be to host her upcoming baby shower in this exact room, now that she would have the financial flexibility to do so. I just smiled, playing the role of the compliant, defeated sister flawlessly. I nodded politely as Elder Thomas offered a lengthy, self-important prayer over the meal, thanking the heavens for softening my heart and bringing me back into the fold of righteous family loyalty. The dinner service began and the charade continued. I watched them gorge themselves on Wagyu steaks and butter-poached lobster. They laughed, they toasted each other, they celebrated their victory. Marcus leaned across the table at one point, giving me a deeply patronizing smile. He told me that this was for the best, that I would feel much better once the heavy burden of managing my penthouse was lifted from my shoulders and handed over to someone who actually needed the space. He graciously promised to let me visit my nieces and nephews once the dust settled and the police closed their files. My mother chimed in, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin, agreeing that this sacrifice would finally earn me some genuine respect in our community. She told the table that it takes a big person to admit when they are wrong, and that she was glad I finally realized that my career meant nothing compared to the legacy of my brother's growing family. Every word out of their mouths was another nail in their own coffins. I sat quietly sipping my sparkling water, absorbing their arrogance, letting them dig the hole as deep as it could possibly go. The church elders praised my parents for their steadfast faith, entirely oblivious to the fact that the golden son sitting across from them was a federal criminal. Deacon Hayes raised his glass of sparkling cider, offering a toast to the power of forgiveness and the beauty of a family that handles its business behind closed doors. I raised my glass in return, my expression perfectly serene. I was holding all the cards, and watching them revel in their false victory was intensely satisfying. As the plates were cleared and the waiters poured the final rounds of coffee and dessert wine, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The casual celebration gave way to greedy anticipation. Marcus's attorney, a man whose ill-fitting suit betrayed his total lack of actual corporate experience, unclasped his briefcase. He cleared his throat loudly, drawing the attention of the entire room. He announced that it was time to finalize the transfer of the penthouse deed, establish the educational trust funds, and sign the formal waiver, dropping all criminal charges against his clients. He pulled out a thick stack of legal documents and slid them across the polished mahogany table directly toward me. He then retrieved an expensive-looking fountain pen from his breast pocket and placed it deliberately on top of the paper stack. The entire room went dead silent. My parents leaned forward in their chairs, their eyes locked onto that pen. Chloe smirked, crossing her arms over her chest, vibrating with triumphant excitement. Marcus sat back, exuding the smug confidence of a man who believed he had just successfully bullied his way out of a felony conviction and into a luxury real estate portfolio. Elder Thomas and Deacon Hayes watched with solemn approval, proud of their work in breaking my spirit. They were entirely convinced the war was over. They thought I was beaten. They thought I was going to pick up that pen and sign away my life. I stared at the heavy gold fountain pen resting on the pristine white stack of legal paper. The silence in the private wine room was absolute thick with the greedy, suffocating anticipation of my family. They truly believed I was broken. They thought the weight of the church elders, the threat of social exile, and the sheer audacity of their demands had finally crushed my spirit. But as I looked at the polished metal of that pen, my mind detached from the oppressive atmosphere of the restaurant and drifted back to just 2 hours prior to the exact moment I had forged my final resolve. I had been standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master suite of my penthouse, adjusting the sharp lapels of my emerald green suit. The woman staring back at me in the reflection was entirely unrecognizable from the exhausted, desperate girl I had been a decade ago. I took a slow, deep breath, smoothing my hands over the immaculate fabric, viewing the suit not as clothing, but as absolute armor. Looking into my own eyes, the memories of what it actually took to build my empire came rushing back with visceral intensity. I remembered the grueling 18-hour workdays that bled into sleepless nights. I remembered eating cold takeout at my desk at 3 in the morning, my eyes burning from staring at financial projection models until the numbers blurred together. I remembered the crippling panic attacks I fought through entirely alone in my tiny first apartment, terrified of failing, because I knew I had absolutely no safety net to fall back on. While I was sleeping under my desk and grinding my youth into dust to build my wealth management firm, my parents were busy elevating Marcus to the status of a deity. I remembered the excruciating family dinners where I would sit in absolute silence, too exhausted to speak, while my mother bragged about my brother's medical residency. They never once asked about my clients. They never asked about my profit margins or the stress of navigating a ruthless corporate world as a Black woman. Instead, they treated my career as a cute little hobby, a temporary distraction until I could fulfill my supposed true purpose of serving my brother's expanding household. They had taken my quiet dedication as a sign of subservience. They assumed that because I did not demand parades for my accomplishments, my success had somehow come easily. They had no idea about the tears, the rejection, and the sheer brutal grit it took to secure my first high-net-worth client. I had sacrificed my 20s, my social life, and my peace of mind to build a fortress of financial security. And what had they done with their resources? They had poured every single drop of their wealth into Marcus. They had drained their retirement accounts, taken out secondary mortgages, and bankrupted their own future to fund his illusion of greatness. They had paid for his luxury vehicles, his extravagant wedding to Chloe, and his pristine suburban image. They had handed him the world on a silver platter, completely ignoring the reality of my survival. The bitter, toxic irony burned in my chest. The very money they had thrown away to elevate him was the exact reason he felt entitled to steal their identities to maintain the lie. I remembered turning away from my reflection in the penthouse mirror and walking over to the study. Hidden behind a piece of abstract art was my biometric wall safe. I pressed my thumb against the glowing scanner. The heavy steel door clicked open with a satisfying mechanical thud. Inside sat the thick black leather dossier Elias had meticulously prepared for me. I reached in and pulled it out. It was heavy-weighted with the undeniable proof of my brother's financial treason and my sister-in-law's blatant extortion. I ran my hand over the smooth leather cover, feeling a profound sense of finality. This was not just a folder of documents, it was a loaded weapon. Inside that dossier was the formal eviction notice that would strip Chloe of her stolen suburban kingdom. Inside was the certified extortion demand she had arrogantly signed, providing the district attorney with irrefutable proof of her malicious intent. Inside was the devastating forensic audit, detailing exactly how Marcus had committed federal wire fraud and identity theft against his own father. I closed the safe, the locking mechanism engaging with a sharp final snap that echoed through my quiet office. I had spent 32 years shrinking myself to fit into a family that only valued me for what I could provide. I had endured the snide remarks, the blatant disrespect, the weaponized community guilt, and the constant suffocating expectation that I was meant to be nothing more than a supporting character in my brother's life. But locking that safe, I knew I was locking away the old Maya forever. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was the executioner. Now sitting at the head of the mahogany table in the private dining room, that memory solidified my posture. The soft clinking of ice in water glasses brought my focus squarely back to the present moment. The cheap strip mall attorney sitting across from me cleared his throat again, clearly annoyed by my hesitation. He tapped the extortion document with his index finger, offering me a patronizing, impatient smile. "Just sign on the dotted line," Maya Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with a sickeningly smug expression. He swirled the expensive dessert wine in his glass. "You know this is the right thing to do. Once the property is transferred and the trust funds are established, we can put all this ugliness behind us. We can be a family again." Chloe nodded eagerly, resting her hand on her pregnant stomach. "Exactly," she chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We are willing to forgive and forget. We just want to move forward and focus on the new baby. You will feel so much better once you do your part." My mother leaned forward, her eyes locked onto the gold pen. "Do not overthink it, Maya. Just pick up the pen. It is time to stop being stubborn and start acting like a sister." I looked at the pen. I looked at the extortion documents. Then I slowly lifted my gaze, making deliberate, chilling eye contact with every single person sitting at that table. I looked at the church elders who thought they could bully me with scripture. I looked at my parents who had traded their daughter for a fraud. I looked at Chloe, whose greed was practically radiating off her skin. And finally, I locked eyes with Marcus, the golden child, who was about to lose everything. The storm had officially arrived, and I was going to make sure it washed away every last trace of their fabricated lives. I did not reach for the pen. Instead, I placed my hands flat against the cool, polished wood of the mahogany table and slowly pushed my chair back. The heavy leather scraped loudly against the floorboards, a sharp, abrasive sound that instantly shattered the suffocating silence of the private dining room. I stood up to my full height, smoothing the front of my emerald suit. The camera would have tracked this perfectly, following my slow, deliberate path as I stepped away from the head of the table and began to pace around the perimeter of the room, circling them like a predator methodically assessing its trapped prey. "What are you doing?" My mother snapped, her perfectly painted lips thinning into a hard line of irritation. "Sit down and sign the papers, Maya. Stop drawing this out. We have dessert coming." "I am not signing anything," I replied, my voice echoing off the walls lined with thousands of vintage wine bottles. "But I am going to give you exactly what you asked for. A complete, unvarnished resolution of our family business." I stopped my pacing directly behind the discount attorney's chair. I leaned down slightly, bringing my face close to his ear. "Are you aware," I whispered, my tone carrying a cold clinical precision, "that drafting a demand for real estate under the explicit threat of continued public defamation constitutes federal extortion? Because my corporate litigators are currently drafting the formal complaint against your bar license, and we have already forwarded the certified documents you sent to the district attorney." The attorney swallowed hard, the Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. The smug, patronizing demeanor he had carried into the room vanished in a single heartbeat. The color drained from his face as he looked down at his own extortion document, suddenly realizing he had not bullied a helpless scapegoat, but had instead handed a federal crime directly to a senior wealth manager. His hands began to tremble as he instinctively pulled his briefcase closer to his chest. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair tipping backward and hitting the wall with a dull thud. "Maya, stop playing games," he roared, pointing a finger at me. "Sign the damn papers or Chloe goes back online right now. We will ruin you." "Let her," I challenged, holding his furious gaze without blinking, "because the internet is about to be the absolute least of your concerns." I reached into the pocket of my suit jacket and pressed a single button on my encrypted phone. At that exact moment, the heavy oak doors of the private dining room swung open. Elias, my chief accountant, stepped inside, carrying a sleek silver briefcase. He did not introduce himself. He did not say a word. He simply walked with absolute professional authority to the media console embedded in the restaurant wall, plugged in a secure encrypted drive, and tapped the control panel. "What is the meaning of this?" Elder Thomas demanded, half rising from his seat, his booming pastoral voice filling the space. "This was supposed to be a spiritual reconciliation. You are disrespecting the sanctuary of family healing. It is a reconciliation of accounts." Elder Y answered smoothly, stepping away from the sweating lawyer and walking back toward the front of the room. "And numbers are the only truth left in this family." From the ceiling above, a massive hidden presentation screen silently rolled down, covering the expensive artwork on the back wall. The high-definition projector hummed to life. A bright, harsh white light flooded the dimly lit dining room, cutting through the romantic ambiance and casting harsh, unforgiving shadows across Marcus and Chloe's faces. The first image that flashed onto the screen was not a property transfer document. It was a high-resolution scan of Chloe's extortion letter, complete with her signature, the notary stamp, and her deeply racist personal statement. Next to it, Elias had projected the formal legal definition of blackmail and extortion under Georgia state law, highlighted in glaring red ink. Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, her manicured nails digging into her cheeks. "You cannot show that. That is a private legal correspondence. You are violating my privacy. You waived your right to privacy the moment you threatened my livelihood on a public live stream." I shot back, my voice slicing through her panic. I gestured to Elias, who clicked to the next slide. The screen shifted. The extortion letter disappeared, replaced by a dizzying, chaotic array of complex financial statements. There were banking logos from institutions across the country, cascading columns of red numbers glaring overdue notices and severe delinquency warnings. The sheer volume of debt displayed on the massive screen was visually overwhelming. My parents squinted at the projection, genuinely confused. They did not understand corporate finance or debt structuring. They only understood the polished, pristine surface of wealth that Marcus presented to them. "What is all this garbage?" my father demanded, gesturing angrily at the screen. "We came here for the penthouse deed. Stop stalling and turn that machine off." "Look closer, Dad," I instructed, my voice dropping to an icy, commanding calm. "Look at the names on those overdue notices. Look at the staggering mountain of toxic debt your golden child has been burying himself under for the last 3 years." Marcus lunged toward the media console, his polished doctor persona completely disintegrating into sheer, unadulterated panic. "Turn that off!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Turn it off right now!" Elias smoothly stepped in front of the console, blocking him with his body, while two massive private security guards I had hired for the evening stepped into the doorway, crossing their arms. Marcus froze in his tracks, his eyes darting wildly between the security detail, the screen, and my unyielding expression. He was trapped inside his own lie. "Sit back down, Marcus," I commanded, projecting every ounce of authority I used to control boardrooms full of billionaires. "You brought the church elders here to witness my submission. The absolute least you can do is let them witness the entirety of your financial genius." Marcus sank back into his chair, his hands visibly shaking, his breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. The smug, victorious smirk had been completely wiped from Chloe's face. She stared up at the massive screen, her eyes scanning the terrifying columns of red numbers, the maxed-out credit lines, and the predatory loan balances. The realization was slowly, agonizingly dawning on her that the limitless bank account she thought her husband possessed was a complete and utter fabrication. "But Marcus makes $300,000 a year," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling with confusion as she looked at her husband. "Marcus, what are these loans? Why are there so many collection notices? I thought we were wealthy." "You see," I continued, pacing slowly across the front of the room, "my brother loves to play the role of the highly successful, untouchable physician. He loves the bespoke suits, the luxury car leases, and the pristine suburban image he parades in front of the church. But maintaining a multimillionaire's lifestyle on a standard six-figure salary requires a tremendous amount of creative accounting. And when the credit cards max out, when the personal loans dry up, and when the bank finally stops indulging the fantasy, the illusion shatters violently." I looked at my mother, who was clutching her pearl necklace, her eyes wide with mounting horror as she read the balances on the screen. Decades of worshipping her son's supposed superiority were colliding with the undeniable mathematical proof of his catastrophic failure. "You spent my entire life telling me I was a disappointment because I chose a quiet desk job over a prestigious medical degree," I said, addressing my parents directly. "You told me I was supposed to be the safety net for his greatness. Well, take a good long look at his greatness. You are looking at a man who is financially drowning, who abandoned his own children in a lobby because he could not afford to face his reality for one more day, and who thought he could simply extort his sister to bail out his sinking ship." I signaled Elias one more time. The screen transitioned again, clearing away the scattered debt notices to display one single massive document. It was a formal, heavily stamped legal notice from a major national bank. The atmosphere in the room shifted from confusion to absolute suffocating dread. The stage was perfectly set for the first true execution of the night. The document displayed on the massive projection screen was a formal notice of default and foreclosure, heavily stamped with the unmistakable seal of the largest mortgage lender in the state of Georgia. The address, printed in bold, undeniable black ink right across the center of the page, was the sprawling six-bedroom suburban estate that Marcus and Chloe called home. Chloe squinted at the glaring white screen, her brow furrowing in deep, genuine confusion. Her eyes darted from the legal jargon to the date at the top of the page, which clearly indicated the notice had been issued over 3 years ago. She turned to her husband, her voice trembling with a sudden creeping anxiety. "Marcus, she demanded, pointing a manicured finger at the projection. Why is our home address on a foreclosure notice? What is this? Marcus did not answer. He was practically shrinking into his expensive bespoke suit, staring down at his half-eaten Wagyu steak, as if hoping the polished mahogany table would open up and swallow him whole. The sweat was visibly beading on his forehead, catching the dim light of the dining room chandelier. I turned my body, directing my full, undivided attention to my sister-in-law. You sent a certified extortion letter to my office this morning, Chloe. I said, my voice cutting through the thick silence of the room with absolute precision. You demanded the deed to my downtown penthouse. You claimed you needed a safe, secure environment to recover from the trauma I supposedly inflicted upon you. You stated in writing that it was the absolute least I could do to compensate you for the privilege of your presence in our family. Chloe lifted her chin, desperately trying to cling to her crumbling sense of superiority. She gripped the edges of her chair, her knuckles turning stark white. I meant every single word she shot back, though her voice lacked its usual venomous bite. You owe us for destroying our vacation and humiliating us in front of the entire church. We are taking that apartment. My lawyer said we have a solid case for emotional distress. I let out a sharp, genuinely amused laugh. It echoed off the walls of the private wine room, a cold sound that made even the church elders flinch. You told me to give you my house, I asked, taking slow, deliberate steps toward her side of the table. Chloe, do you even know you have been living in my property for 3 years? The color instantly drained from Chloe's face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother Beatrice let out a loud, confused gasp, gripping my father's arm. That is impossible, Chloe finally stammered, shaking her head in aggressive denial. You are lying. You are just trying to scare us. We leased that property from a private corporate landlord. Marcus structured an exclusive high-level rental agreement with a firm called Horizon Holdings after he decided we needed more liquidity for our investments. I did not break eye contact with her. I simply snapped my fingers. Elias, standing diligently at the media console, tapped a single button on his tablet. The harsh white projection on the wall shifted instantly. The foreclosure notice disappeared, replaced by the official corporate registration documents for Horizon Holdings LLC filed directly with the Georgia Secretary of State. The document clearly listed the managing structure of the corporation. The sole managing member holding 100% of the voting shares and absolute executive control was me. I watched the exact second the reality fractured Chloe's mind. Her eyes darted back and forth across the screen, reading my name over and over again, completely unable to process the magnitude of the deception. 3 years ago, I explained projecting my voice so every person in the room could hear the pathetic truth: your husband was drowning. He missed 6 consecutive mortgage payments because your insatiable demand for designer clothes, luxury cars, and country club memberships completely devoured his salary. The bank was coming to throw you out on the street. Your perfect affluent suburban facade was exactly 3 weeks away from being publicly vaporized. I paced behind Marcus's chair, resting my hand lightly on the leather backrest. He flinched at my touch. He came to my office? I continued. He sat on my sofa and cried like a child. He begged me for a massive cash bailout because he was terrified you would leave him if you found out he was broke. But I am a wealth manager. I do not throw cash into a burning fire. I refused to give him a personal loan. Instead, I used Horizon Holdings to anonymously purchase his distressed debt directly from the bank. I paid off the arrears, I bought the mortgage note, and I legally acquired the deed to the property. I walked back to the head of the table and stared directly down at Chloe. I saved your family from homelessness, I stated coldly, and I became your landlord. Every single month, when Marcus pays rent to that faceless corporate entity, he is depositing that money directly into my investment portfolio. For 3 years, you have been hosting lavish dinner parties, filming home tours for social media, and bragging about your real estate prowess inside a house that legally belongs to the very woman you treat like a servant. Chloe looked like she had been physically struck. She turned to Marcus, grabbing his arm and shaking him violently. Tell me she is lying, she shrieked, her voice pitching into absolute hysteria. Marcus, look at me and tell me this is a joke. Tell me we own our home. Marcus could not look at her. He buried his face in his hands, letting out a pathetic, muffled sob that confirmed everything. Chloe recoiled from him as if he were diseased. She pressed her back against her chair, her chest heaving as she hyperventilated. The suburban kingdom she had used as a weapon to make everyone else feel inferior was nothing but a rented cage, and I held the only key. Elias stepped forward, opening his sleek silver briefcase. He retrieved a thick, legal-sized envelope and handed it to me. I walked over to Chloe and dropped the heavy packet directly onto her empty dinner plate. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. That is a formal court-approved eviction notice, I announced, my tone stripped of any remaining mercy. When you lease a luxury property from my holding company, you are required to sign a strict morality and criminal conduct clause. Abandoning 4 minor children in a commercial building and being formally charged with felony reckless endangerment constitutes a catastrophic breach of that lease. Furthermore, attempting to extort the legal owner of the property for another piece of real estate voids the contract entirely. I leaned down, bracing my hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her in place. By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia, your lease is terminated, I whispered, ensuring she heard every single syllable. You have exactly 72 hours to pack up your designer clothes, gather your things, and vacate my property. If you leave so much as a scratch on my hardwood floors, I will sue you for the repair costs. Chloe erupted. The carefully constructed, elegant persona she had maintained for years completely shattered. She let out a guttural, furious scream, slapping the eviction notice off her plate. The envelope hit the floor, spilling the legal documents across the expensive rug. She began sobbing hysterically, but this time there was no camera, no audience to manipulate, and no sympathy to harvest. The tears were born of pure, unadulterated devastation. She had nothing. My mother. Beatrice suddenly stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. She pointed a trembling finger at me, her face contorted with a mixture of shock and fury. You made your own brother pay you rent? She demanded, her voice cracking. You bought his home and treated him like a complete stranger. You sat there and watched them struggle, knowing you held their entire life in your hands. What kind of monster does that to their own flesh and blood? I turned my deadly calm gaze to my mother. I saved him from the street, Mom, I replied, my voice ringing with absolute authority. I put a roof over your grandchildren's heads when the bank was ready to throw them out, and this is how he repaid me. He tried to dump his responsibilities on me, and his wife tried to steal my primary residence. I took a step toward my parents, the anger I had suppressed for decades finally rising to the surface. But you should not be angry at me for buying his house, I said, signaling Elias with a sharp nod of my head. You should be angry about how he funded his lifestyle after his credit was destroyed. Because the truth about the mansion is only the beginning of his betrayal. The screen behind me flickered, preparing to load the next catastrophic piece of evidence. The destruction of Chloe was complete, but the true reckoning, the ultimate betrayal that would shatter my parents' world forever, was just seconds away. Elias pressed a single key on his tablet. The harsh white projection on the restaurant wall shifted abruptly. The foreclosure and eviction notices vanished, replaced by a dense, intricate grid of financial records. Dozens of highly classified banking documents materialized on the screen. There were aggressive promissory notes, high-yield personal loans, secondary lines of credit, and staggering credit card statements. But unlike the previous documents that bore Marcus's name, these carried a different designation. The name printed in bold black ink at the top of every single page was Desmond. Dad, I want you to put your reading glasses on, I said, my voice eerily calm, slicing through the heavy, suffocating silence of the private dining room. I want you to look very closely at the name, the social security number, and the signatures on those loan applications. My father slowly reached into the breast pocket of his suit jacket. His hands were visibly shaking. He retrieved his wire-rimmed glasses and slid them onto his face, leaning forward to inspect the massive projection. The entire room held its breath. For a long, agonizing minute, the only sound was the faint hum of the projector and the clinking of ice melting in untouched water glasses. I watched the exact moment my father's entire universe collapsed. His broad shoulders suddenly slumped. His chest caved inward as if the oxygen had been violently sucked from his lungs. "This is my social security number," Desmond whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying hollow confusion. "But I did not sign these papers. I have never done business with these banks. I have not applied for a credit card in over a decade." He turned his head slowly, looking at me with wide, panicked eyes. "Maya, what is this? Who took out these loans in my name?" I did not answer him immediately. I simply shifted my gaze down the table to my brother. Marcus was no longer sitting upright. He was gripping the edge of the mahogany table so tightly his knuckles were bloodless. The polished, arrogant facade of the successful physician had completely evaporated. He looked exactly like what he truly was, a cornered, desperate fraud. "Tell him, Marcus," I commanded, my tone stripped of any familial warmth. "Tell your father how you managed to keep your demanding wife draped in designer brands after the bank destroyed your credit score 3 years ago." "Maya, please." Marcus choked out, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "Do not do this. Please, I beg you. I was going to pay it all back. I swear to God I was going to pay him back." The admission hung in the air, a devastating confession that struck my parents like a physical blow. "Pay it back with what, Marcus?" I shot back, taking a slow step toward him. "You make $300,000 a year and you spend $600,000. Your entire life is a mathematical impossibility." I turned back to my father, who was staring at his son in absolute uncomprehending horror. When the bank foreclosed on his mansion, Marcus lost his pristine credit rating. I explained, delivering the facts with brutal surgical precision. But his wife still demanded the country club lifestyle. She still wanted luxury vacations to Cabo and five-star dinners. So instead of acting like a man and telling his wife the truth, your golden boy decided to steal your identity. "No," my mother gasped, standing up so fast her chair nearly toppled over. She shook her head violently, desperately trying to reject the nightmare unfolding in front of her. "No, that is a lie. Marcus is a good boy. He is a doctor. He saves lives. He would never steal from his own father. You fabricated these documents to frame him because you have always been jealous of him." "Mom, the delusion ends tonight," I stated, my voice echoing off the wine-covered walls. I gestured toward the screen. Jessica's forensic accountants traced every single penny. Marcus intercepted your mail. He routed digital statements to a hidden post office box. He forged Desmond's signature to leverage everything your father spent his entire life building. He mortgaged your golden years to buy his wife's silence. I pointed directly at Chloe, who was sitting frozen, her eyes wide with shock as she stared at her husband. "That $5,000 non-refundable deposit for the Cabo resort you tried to fly to on Friday, paid for with a credit card issued in Desmond's name. That emerald green maternity dress you are wearing right now, bought with funds borrowed against Desmond's retirement account." Chloe looked down at her own dress in absolute horror, suddenly realizing she was draped in stolen goods. She recoiled from Marcus, pressing herself against the armrest of her chair, as if his proximity was physically repulsive. "You stole from your own father to buy my clothes!" she shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. "Marcus, what have you done? We are going to go to jail." "You already are going to jail, Chloe," I reminded her coldly. "But now you understand exactly why your husband was so desperate to flee the country. He knew the debt collectors were closing in. He knew the house of cards was falling. He dumped your children in my lobby, not just for a vacation, but because he was running from a federal financial crime." Desmond slowly sank back into his chair. The proud patriarch, the man who had spent my entire life lecturing me about responsibility, duty, and sacrificing for the greater good of the family, looked utterly broken. He stared at the screen, reading the total balance of the fraudulent debt, highlighted in bright red at the bottom of the ledger. Over $400,000. His retirement was gone. His financial security was obliterated. "You gave him everything, Dad," I said softly, The bitter reality of my childhood finally laid bare before the entire room. You emptied your savings to put him through medical school. You bought his first cars. You financed his lavish wedding. You spent my entire life telling me that I needed to sacrifice my own dreams to support him. But your sacrifices were never enough. When he ran out of your freely given money, he simply stole the rest. I looked at Elder Thomas and Deacon Hayes. The two church leaders who had tried to bully me into submission just a day prior were sitting in stunned, disgusted silence. They had come to witness the humbling of a rebellious daughter. Instead, they were witnessing the total moral and financial bankruptcy of the family they had elevated as a pillar of their community. The righteous, perfect family was nothing but a den of thieves held together by a woman they had continuously despised. Desmond buried his face in his hands. A raw, guttural sob tore from his throat. It was the sound of a man mourning the death of his legacy. He had built an idol out of his son, and that idol had just crushed him to dust. Beatrice fell to her knees beside my father's chair. She clutched his arm, weeping uncontrollably, but she could not look at Marcus. The golden child was dead to her. The illusion was entirely eradicated. Marcus was weeping openly now, blubbering pathetic apologies that fell on completely deaf ears. He reached across the table toward me, his hands shaking. "Maya, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "You have the money. You can pay this off. You can save Dad's retirement. I will do whatever you want. I will sign whatever you need. Just do not let them take me away. Please, you are my sister." I looked down at the sniveling, cowardly man who had spent his entire life taking credit for my parents' sacrifices and mocking my independent success. I felt absolutely no pity. "I am a wealth manager, Marcus." I replied, my voice hard as diamond. "I protect the assets of people who earn their money honestly. I do not negotiate with terrorists, and I certainly do not bail out identity thieves." I turned away from the table and nodded to the security guards stationed at the door. One of them immediately pulled a two-way radio from his belt and spoke a single quiet command into the receiver. The grand finale was no longer in my hands. I had presented the evidence. I had shattered the illusion. The consequences were already waiting outside the restaurant doors, ready to collect exactly what was owed. The heavy oak doors of the private dining room remained open. The ambient noise of the main restaurant had fallen completely silent, replaced by a sudden electric tension. Then the flashing lights arrived. Red and blue strobes pierced through the sheer curtains of the front windows, reflecting violently off the crystal wine glasses on our table. The wail of police sirens echoed from the street below, cutting through the sophisticated jazz music playing over the restaurant speakers. The luxurious, insulated atmosphere of the room shattered instantly. Marcus scrambled backward, his chair tipping over and crashing onto the hardwood floor. He stared at the flashing lights painting the walls, his face completely devoid of color. He looked as if the physical manifestation of his guilt had just parked directly outside. "What did you do?" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking as she whipped her head around to glare at me. "Maya, what did you do?" "I did exactly what I promised," I replied, smoothing the lapels of my emerald suit with absolute composure. "I managed the family assets. While you were busy shopping for maternity dresses on my father's stolen credit and drafting extortion letters, I packaged the foreclosure notices, the extortion demand, and the comprehensive forensic audit of Marcus's federal wire fraud. I forwarded the entire encrypted dossier to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI and the Atlanta Police Department. They have been waiting outside for my signal." Marcus let out a sound that was less human and more like a dying animal. He dropped to his knees, his expensive bespoke trousers hitting the floor. He literally crawled toward my father, his hands clasped together in a pathetic, desperate display. "Dad, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "You have to tell them you authorized it. Tell them it was a joint venture. Tell them you signed those loans to help me. If you do not say you authorized the credit lines, I am going to federal prison. I will lose my medical license. Everything you sacrificed for me will be gone." It was the ultimate insult. Even in the face of his own absolute destruction, Marcus fully expected our father to absorb his punishment. He expected the man whose retirement he had just obliterated to go to prison in his place. Desmond looked down at the son he had worshipped for 35 years. The disgust on his face was profound and absolute. "You stole my retirement, Marcus." Desmond stated, his voice trembling but devoid of any paternal warmth. "You stole my name, my credit, and my future to buy designer handbags. I will not perjure myself to save a thief." Heavy footsteps echoed down the restaurant hallway. Two uniformed Atlanta police officers stepped into the private room, flanked immediately by two plainclothes FBI agents wearing tactical vests. The sheer physical presence of federal law enforcement sucked the remaining oxygen from the space. The discount attorney, who had been sitting frozen in his chair, quietly closed his briefcase and backed away toward the far wall. He was desperately trying to distance himself from his clients, knowing that fighting federal agents over an extortion charge he had personally drafted was a guaranteed ticket to disbarment. Marcus Vance, the lead federal agent, announced, holding up a stack of warrants. "You are under arrest for felony wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and bank fraud. Chloe Vance, you are under arrest for felony reckless endangerment, child abandonment, and attempted extortion." Chloe completely lost her mind. She scrambled away from the agents, knocking over a tray of empty dessert plates. The fine china shattered against the floor, sending shards of porcelain flying across the room. "Do not touch me!" she screamed, flailing her arms as an officer approached her with steel handcuffs. "I am pregnant. You cannot arrest me. I did not know anything about the money. He lied to me. My husband is a liar. I am a victim here." She turned her furious, tear-streaked face toward Marcus, who was already being pulled to his feet and cuffed by the agents. The loyalty she had feigned when demanding my penthouse dissolved instantly when faced with a federal indictment. "You promised me we were rich," she wailed, her voice echoing through the entire restaurant. "You promised me a luxury life. You ruined my life, Marcus. I want a divorce. I am calling my lawyer right now." "You have the right to remain silent," the arresting officer recited, ignoring her hysterics as the metallic snap of the handcuffs echoed loudly in the room. Marcus did not fight. He did not argue. He just wept, his head hung low. The golden child was finally facing the absolute reality of his actions, and he lacked the spine to stand tall. The officers marched Marcus and Chloe out of the private dining room and straight through the main dining area of Atlas. Dozens of Atlanta's most elite residents, politicians, and business moguls watched the highly respected physician and his glamorous wife being paraded out in steel cuffs. Cell phone cameras flashed from the surrounding tables. The humiliation was public, absolute, and completely irreversible. Their carefully curated social standing was reduced to ashes in front of the exact community they had tried so hard to impress. Beatrice fell to the floor, clutching the edge of the mahogany table. She let out a guttural, agonizing scream as they marched her son and daughter-in-law out of the room. It was the devastating sound of a matriarch watching her entire fabricated kingdom burn to the ground. She reached out toward me from the floor, her eyes wide with terror and desperation. "Maya, please," she begged, her expensive makeup ruined by a flood of tears. "They are going to take the babies. Child Protective Services is going to put them in foster care. You have to do something." "The children are completely safe," I responded, looking down at the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel worthless. "They are sleeping in my guest wing under state-mandated temporary guardianship. They have food, 24-hour security, and a caregiver who does not view them as a burden or a bargaining chip. I will ensure they are protected from the fallout of their parents' criminal behavior." Elder Thomas and Deacon Hayes quietly stood up from the table. They adjusted their tailored suits, completely avoiding eye contact with my parents. There were no more lengthy prayers for family unity. There were no more manipulative demands for me to surrender my apartment and learn my place. They had seen the irrefutable truth, and they wanted absolutely nothing to do with the monumental disgrace my family had brought upon themselves. They slipped out of the room without offering a single word of comfort to Desmond or Beatrice. I picked up my leather folder and locked the silver clasp. The restaurant manager stood nervously in the doorway, clearly waiting to see how to handle the chaos left behind. I pulled out my corporate card and handed it to him. Settle the account, I instructed, including a generous tip for the staff who had to witness this disruption. I turned back to my parents. They were sitting alone in the wreckage of the private dining room, surrounded by broken china and half-empty wine glasses. Desmond was staring blankly at the projection screen, which still displayed the massive six-figure debt he now legally had to navigate. Beatrice was sobbing softly into her hands, entirely broken. "You spent 32 years telling me I was a disappointment," I said, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet of the room. "You bankrupted yourselves to build a false idol, and you expected me to be the safety net when he inevitably failed. You allowed your daughter-in-law to treat me like a servant in my own city, but I am not your safety net anymore. I highly suggest you retain a bankruptcy attorney, Dad. You are going to need one." I turned on my heel and walked out of the restaurant, stepping into the cool evening air. The police cruisers were already driving away, carrying my brother and his wife to a holding cell. I walked to my car, my posture straight, my conscience entirely clear. I had not destroyed my family. I had simply handed them the mirror they had been avoiding their entire lives. The morning after the arrest, the local news cycle was absolutely ruthless. Marcus's mugshot stripped of his bespoke suits, and his arrogant smirk was broadcast across every major network in Atlanta. The federal prosecutors did not offer him a polite plea deal or a discreet arrangement. They brought down the full crushing weight of the United States justice system. He was indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. The state medical board immediately suspended his license pending trial, ensuring he would never practice medicine again. The golden child who had spent his entire life shielded from the slightest inconvenience by my parents was now sitting in a concrete federal holding cell, staring at a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 to 15 years. There were no secret trust funds left to bail him out. There was no mother to scold the judge into letting him go. He was finally completely alone with his own reflection, and the reality of his actions was absolute. Chloe predictably attempted to play the victim one last time. The moment she managed to post bail using money borrowed from a distant relative, she sprinted directly to family court and filed for divorce. She threw Marcus to the wolves without a second thought, claiming she was a terrified, oblivious housewife who had absolutely no idea her husband was a financial predator. She genuinely believed that severing the marriage would protect her from the crushing debt and instantly restore her pristine image. She severely underestimated the undeniable paper trail she had so proudly created. During the emergency custody hearing, Chloe stood before the family court judge and demanded the immediate return of her children. She wept loudly, clutched her pregnant stomach, and begged the court to reunite her family, casting herself as the wronged matriarch. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for theatrical nonsense, simply pulled up the evidence file my legal team had meticulously submitted. She read Chloe's racist demanding extortion letter out loud, for the public record, her voice dripping with disgust. She played the security footage of Chloe shoving her crying toddlers into my commercial lobby. And finally, she held up the infamous pink sticky note with the drawn smiley face. The judge looked down from the bench and informed Chloe that abandoning minors to go on a luxury vacation was not a mere lapse in judgment, but an absolute, unforgivable forfeiture of maternal fitness. Child Protective Services permanently revoked her custody rights, officially naming me the long-term legal guardian of all the children, including the unborn baby, once it arrived. Chloe left the courtroom entirely empty-handed, stripped of the family she had used as props for her social media facade. Her punishment did not end in the courtroom. Exactly 72 hours after the restaurant confrontation, the eviction notice I had served her officially expired. She returned to the sprawling suburban mansion, expecting to find some kind of legal loophole. Instead, she found two Fulton County Sheriff deputies standing on the front porch, alongside a professional moving crew. She was given exactly 20 minutes to gather whatever personal clothing she could fit into two suitcases. Everything else, the designer furniture, the expensive electronics, the luxury vehicles parked in the driveway, was legally seized to satisfy the massive financial arrears Marcus owed my holding company. I watched the security feed from my office tablet as Chloe stood on the sidewalk screaming at the deputies before finally dragging her suitcases down the street. Her affluent neighbors, the same people she had spent years trying to impress, stood on their manicured lawns and watched in silent judgment. The self-proclaimed queen of the suburbs had been officially dethroned, cast out into the harsh reality she had so viciously mocked me for navigating. The destruction of Marcus and Chloe was swift and legally binding, but the collapse of my parents was a slow, agonizing social death. Desmond and Beatrice had built their entire identity on the illusion of Black excellence, relying heavily on their status within the church and the community to feed their massive egos. That status evaporated overnight. The spectacular arrest at Atlas Restaurant had been witnessed by the very people they had spent decades trying to impress. The church elders, desperate to distance themselves from a federal financial scandal, quietly informed my parents that their presence at Sunday service was no longer appropriate. Elder Thomas, who had tried to bully me in the fellowship hall just days prior, walked right past my father in the grocery store without making eye contact. The prestigious committees my mother chaired suddenly stopped returning her calls. Their country club friends completely ghosted them. The community they had weaponized against me had turned its back on them with brutal efficiency. Financially, their devastation was absolute. With Marcus locked away and unable to maintain the fraudulent credit lines, the predatory lenders turned their aggressive crosshairs directly onto my father. The massive debt Marcus had accumulated using Desmond's social security number was legally binding. My parents were forced to hire a bankruptcy attorney. I watched from a calculated distance as their beautiful, sprawling brick estate was listed for a humiliating short sale. They were forced to auction off their antique assets, downgrade their vehicles, and move into a cramped, modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. The luxurious retirement they had dreamed of, the golden years they assumed Marcus would fund in gratitude for their sacrifices, were completely wiped out. They had bet their entire existence on the wrong child, and the house always wins. Desperation makes people forget the vicious boundaries they previously trampled over. The voicemails began arriving precisely 3 weeks after the restaurant confrontation. My secure phone line captured every frantic, tearful message. It was always my mother, her voice completely stripped of its usual commanding authority, reduced to a pathetic, trembling whisper. She would leave lengthy messages begging me to answer, pleading for a small loan to help them secure a decent apartment, crying that they had nothing left and nowhere else to turn. God tried to invoke the memory of my childhood, tried to pull every emotional string she had ever installed in my mind. She promised she had changed, promised she saw my value, now promised she would make it right if I just gave her a second chance. My father left exactly one voicemail. He did not ask for money. He simply stated, his voice cracking with the heavy, hollow sound of a broken man, that he was deeply sorry. He said he finally understood what he had lost, and that the absolute silence from my end of the line was the loudest, most agonizing punishment he could ever endure. He admitted he had failed me, and that he would carry that shame to his grave. I listened to every single voicemail sitting in the quiet, sunlit sanctuary of my penthouse, while my nieces and nephews played safely down the hall. I did not feel a flicker of guilt. I did not shed a single tear for their sudden misfortune. I calmly selected all the messages on my screen and pressed delete. I instructed Jessica, my corporate attorney, to issue formal cease and desist letters to both of my parents, warning them that any further attempts to contact me, my business, or the children would be considered criminal harassment and dealt with swiftly by law enforcement. I changed my personal phone number, upgraded the security protocols at the children's new private schools, and completely severed the final decaying roots of my biological family tree. They had spent my entire life demanding that I learn my place and respect their authority. I had simply built an impenetrable new kingdom and locked the heavy iron gates firmly behind them. The air in my penthouse was entirely different now. It was no longer a solitary fortress guarding me against the constant barrage of my family's financial drain. It had transformed into a thriving, breathing sanctuary. Down the hall, the sounds of genuine childhood joy echoed off the hardwood floors. Leo, the 8-year-old who used to flinch every time a door slammed in his parents' house, was currently explaining the intricacies of a massive science project to his new private tutor. The twins were in the sunroom, covered in washable paint, completely free from the rigid, pristine aesthetic their mother had forced upon them for social media clout. Little Mia was napping peacefully in her newly designed nursery. And the fifth baby, a healthy little girl, who would never know the toxic chaos of her biological parents, was due to arrive in just 2 months. I had hired a team of top-tier pediatric nurses and early childhood educators to ensure my home was not just a shelter, but an absolute environment of growth, stability, and healing. I sat at the expansive mahogany dining table in my living room, the exact same space where this entire nightmare had begun, with a smug announcement and a ridiculous demand for free babysitting. But the energy in the room was entirely transformed. The heavy, suffocating entitlement of my brother and his wife had been permanently scrubbed from the atmosphere. Sitting across from me were Elias and Jessica, my two most trusted advisors, watching with quiet professional reverence as I reviewed the thick stack of legal documents resting in front of me. This was the final piece of the puzzle. It was the ultimate, unbreakable barrier between the innocent children sleeping down the hall and the financial predators who had brought them into the world. I picked up my gold fountain pen. It was the exact same model of pen Marcus's discount attorney had so arrogantly placed on the table at the restaurant, expecting me to sign away my penthouse and my dignity. But I was not signing a surrender. I was signing an impenetrable declaration of generational wealth and protection. The document was titled the Horizon Legacy Trust. It was a masterpiece of corporate and family law, drafted with the ruthless precision of a litigator who understood exactly how manipulative desperate people could be. I had instructed Jessica to build a financial fortress with walls so high and legal spikes so sharp that Marcus and Chloe would never be able to touch a single cent. The trust was heavily endowed with the millions of dollars I had aggressively multiplied over my career. But it came with ironclad, non-negotiable stipulations. The funds could only be dispersed directly to accredited educational institutions, verified medical providers, and licensed therapeutic facilities. There was a strict provision for secured housing and living expenses, but all payments were to be managed exclusively by a third-party fiduciary board that I had personally appointed. No cash would ever be handed directly to the beneficiaries until they reached the age of 30, and even then, only if they had completed rigorous financial literacy programs that I had specifically outlined in the bylaws. I was not going to raise another generation of financially illiterate, entitled adults. Most importantly, Jessica had embedded a lethal exclusionary clause. If Marcus or Chloe ever attempted to legally challenge the trust, extort the children, or manipulate their way into accessing the funds after their release from the penal system, they would trigger an automatic severe financial penalty. The trust would immediately freeze and transfer the disputed assets into a locked charitable foundation. I had effectively placed a financial tripwire around my nieces and nephews. Their biological parents could never use them as human ATM machines ever again. I pressed the gold nib of the pen against the thick parchment. The ink flowed smoothly, dark and permanent, as I signed my name at the bottom of the final page. I did not just sign away a portion of my wealth. I signed away the generational curse of my family. I signed away the toxic expectation that Black women must endlessly set themselves on fire to keep their entitled relatives warm. I signed a new reality into existence, one where hard work, integrity, and genuine love were the only currencies that mattered. I slid the documents across the polished table to Jessica. She carefully reviewed the signature, stamped it with her official notary seal, and placed the entire packet into her secure briefcase. "It is done," Maya, Jessica said, her voice filled with a deep, resonant respect. "The trust is officially active. The children are permanently insulated. They will have every opportunity in the world, and their parents will never be able to cast a shadow over their futures." Elias closed his laptop, offering a rare, genuine smile. "You executed a flawless restructuring, Maya. Not just of your portfolio, but of your entire legacy. The bad debt has been entirely liquidated. Only the prime assets remain. I thanked them both, walking them to the private elevator. As the steel doors glided shut, leaving me alone in the expansive quiet of my living room, a profound, unshakable peace settled over my soul. I slowly walked back to the center of the room. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the Atlanta skyline, casting long, golden shadows across the pristine floors. The perspective of my life felt as though it was slowly pulling back, expanding outward to reveal the full, triumphant picture. The view seemed to steadily widen, taking in the towering glass windows, the curated art on the walls, and the undeniable aura of a woman who stood in absolute unbothered control of her own empire. I had reclaimed the very living room where I was once told I had no family and no purpose. I thought about the church elders who had tried to bully me in a cramped fellowship hall, trying to force me to bow to a corrupt patriarchy. I thought about my mother, who had tried to convince the world I was a jealous, unstable spinster. I thought about Marcus sitting in a federal cell, stripped of his bespoke suits and his stolen credit. I thought about Chloe evicted and entirely forgotten by the internet mob she had tried to weaponize against me. They had all looked at me and seen a target. They had seen a woman they could easily overpower with guilt and obligation. They had completely misunderstood the assignment. I was never the supporting act in their delusional family drama. I was the architect of their reckoning. They wanted me to be the safety net that caught them when they fell from their pedestal of lies. Instead, I became the concrete floor. I turned to face the expansive windows, my reflection entirely clear and uncompromising against the backdrop of the city I had conquered. I crossed my arms, feeling the impeccable cut of my suit, the physical manifestation of my hard-earned authority. A slow, knowing smile spread across my face as I looked directly ahead. When they turn you into the servant, make sure you are the one delivering the final bill.